Hello, you've reached Gloria with Farmstead Talk, and I am here today with Tom with the New Jersey Gardener, and he is representing his state of New Jersey in this homesteading interview today. Welcome, Tom, and thank you for joining me.
Hi, Gloria. Thank you. It's good to talk with you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So would you like to share with the audience where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at New Jersey Gardener, and you can follow me there.
Okay, great. So, Tom, if you would share a little bit about yourself, your family, where you're currently living.
Yeah, definitely. So I live with my wife, Emily, and my baby daughter, 9 months old, in North New Jersey. It's about a half hour outside of New York City. So I'm in the suburbs of New Jersey. Um, and yeah, we're in Morris County, which has about a population of about 500,000 people. So just a lot of working families, residential homes.
Okay. So describe your growing area and your yard. So would you consider yourself a suburban homesteader then?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that I incorporate a lot of homesteading type principles into a small suburban plot. So I live in a single family home, about roughly a quarter acre backyard space. And that's where I mostly do a lot of my growing, a little bit of front yard space as well. And yeah, it's neighbors on all sides, fenced in yard. So definitely getting creative in a small space.
What is the culture there like? Are they kind of like-minded people there? Is it a close-knit community?
It's where I live, it is actually pretty close knit, but it's also very diverse. There's a lot of people that commute into New York City for work, so a lot of people that are busy, they hop on the train, they come home, and want to spend a lot of time with their family when they are at home. So New Jersey is a very diverse cultural area, but you definitely get that feeling of a close knit community as well.
Okay. So what growing zone are you in and what types of methods are you utilizing there?
So I'm in zone 6B, pretty close to 6A, but still in 6B. And the climate here, you have a pretty mild spring with a lot of rain and pretty hot summers. The soil's pretty good. There's a lot of clay in the soil, so I do a lot of raised bed gardening and try to supplement that way. I do have some perennials in the ground, but yeah, you don't dig too far and you get a lot of clay.
What kind of perennials do you have?
So I have a few fruit bushes, blackberry bush. We're looking into potentially doing some trees, like apple trees grow really well here. We haven't done that yet. So strawberries, things of that nature.
Okay. And then with the raised beds, are you using irrigation system, wood chips, or what other methods are you utilizing to try to keep the soil health in good shape and to decrease your maintenance in your gardens?
Yeah, definitely. So right now I am using irrigation system, drip hoses. I do use local wood chips for to help the soil structure, keep the moisture in as well. So I don't have to water as much because the utilities can get kind of expensive here. So I would love to look into getting rain barrels, things of that nature. And yeah, so the wood chips really help a lot in that regard. And a lot of times it's free at the local parks, which is really nice. So I don't have to spend a fortune on mulch or wood chips.
Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of crops are you growing in your yard there?
So I do a lot of different fruits, vegetables, herbs, root vegetables, things like tomatoes, cucumbers, dill, basil, onions, beets, different types of berries, a lot of leafy greens as well. So I actually, in the tiny space, try to pack a lot in there to get a lot of food varieties.
Okay. Is there anything that you would say that grows the best for you or?
Yeah, definitely. So tomatoes grow really well here in New Jersey. So they're very prolific. Same with zucchini. Zucchini's really high yield here. The root vegetables can be kind of tough just because of the clay in the soil. So having the raised beds do help, but we have a lot of problem with deer and groundhogs and rabbits. So, you plant anything in the ground, you come back the next day and it's been bitten off. So, but I've had some success with carrots as well. Herbs seem to do pretty good here, but we do have a pretty deep freeze in the winter. So some of the perennials are pretty hard to grow here, or to grow kind of large.
Okay. On your Instagram page, you have shown off your seed saving skills and techniques and stuff. And if you would share a little bit about what kind of seeds you're saving, and share with the audience, if you will, your techniques for saving seeds.
Yeah, absolutely. Seed saving was something that I really got into at an early stage in my journey of backyard homesteading. I would go to the grocery store, and in New Jersey, produce is so expensive. My mother-in-law lives out in Ohio, and she spends maybe $1.99 for strawberries, say, and we probably spend $4.99. And that's kind of across the gamut of anything, cucumbers, whatever it may be. So I found, that by trying to save the seeds of various plants, that I was saving a lot of money and a lot of trips to the produce section of the grocery store. So the one thing that I did learn is, I have a lot of heirloom open pollinated type plants, so that I can collect those seeds. And
let me stop you real quick right there. If you would explain to the audience what that means with open pollination.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the fruit and vegetables that you'll get at the store are from hybridized plants. So you kind of have a parent root system, and then the fruit that grows, if you were trying to collect those seeds and replant them, you're not necessarily going to replant or regrow a similar type of fruit the next year, or vegetable. And so the heirloom seeds, or the open pollinated plants, there's no hybridization that's done to those. So when you grow that and you collect the seeds from that fruit or the flowers, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to replicate the similar, if not all of the characteristics of the parent plant.
A good seed to save.
So you could save a lot of different types of seeds. I mean, I will typically look for the plant that has a strong stalk to it, a plant that looks like it's very prolific, has yielding a lot of big fruit. And those ones I tend to want to save because I know that it has good genes, basically good DNA in that seed. Yeah, so sometimes that means sacrificing a really big tomato that you would love to save to eat, but I'm sacrificing it maybe to save the seeds for it, and knowing that I'm going to get a lot of different plants from just that one tomato.
Right. And then once you have those collected them seeds, how are you actually preserving them so they don't mold, or they don't go bad?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, seeds do have a shelf life in terms of germination. So, you may get a couple years where the germination rate falls off. So what I do try to do is save them in a very cool, dry place. So I actually have some containers that I try to keep them in, just plastic containers where moisture doesn't really get into them, keep them away from high humidity type places. We don't really get a lot of humidity here in the winter anyway, so that's beneficial to us. So yeah, I've had a lot of success just collecting the seeds. If they are wet, like from a tomato, for example, giving it time to separate out and and dry out.
There's a lot of different techniques with collecting tomato seeds.
Hmm.
Do you do anything special? I mean, a lot of people will soak them in with different elements and things like that. Some people just separate them and dry them out. Do you do anything special with yours?
No, I've been able to, so I'll collect some, put them in a bucket, kind of smush them around, and just pick out the seeds and let them dry out. And I've had success that way. Sometimes with the tomatoes now, I'll just let the tomato drop directly into the garden where it is. And then, next year I'll see little tomato sprouts coming up just naturally. So
Right.
in a way, that's kind of seed saving as well.
It is.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about food preservation and what type of preservation that you use in your household, and what would you say out of the different techniques would be your favorite type of preservation?
Yeah, definitely. So I've done canning, I've done dehydration, uh, drying of herbs, even just blanching and freezing vegetables as well. I think my favorite is probably either canning or dehydrating, just because I find being shelf stable and not having to take up freezer space is very helpful and beneficial to me. So, I have canned tomatoes and pickles and a lot of dried herbs like basil. I'll even dehydrate some peppers, and I have those just on the shelf. And those will last for a really long time. And especially in the winter months where, our growing season here probably lasts from April to mid-October. So, November through March, there's not much growing going on. So having those cans on the shelf of tomatoes that I can make sauce or throw into a stew is really helpful, that I don't have to go to the store and buy more tomatoes during those winter months.
Absolutely. Yeah. What kind of sustainable practices do you utilize in your home in the garden?
Yeah, so I try to reuse a lot of the resources that I have around me. I do a lot of composting, so nothing really goes to waste, whether it's something that I got from the garden or that I bought from the store. So I've got a couple compost piles going on, and that's even beneficial that I don't have to go out and purchase a lot of chemicals for fertilization. Like I said, I try to repurpose. My neighbor was getting rid of some wood, and I use that to make another garden bed. So things like that, just looking at the resources around me and trying to not just throw them out as waste, but give them a second life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. If somebody had come to you and asked you, Tom, I want to start, doing what you're doing and growing food, and this person has no experience, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I mean, and that was the situation I was in. I didn't come from growing up around farming or homesteading, anything like that. And so I guess the thing that I would say is, start small. You don't have to necessarily uh, have everything all at once. So start with things like herbs, stuff that's easy to grow, tomatoes, and then just try to understand where you live, because each climate is different and things grow differently wherever you are. So what, people are showing out on social media that they're growing out in California isn't necessarily going to work here in New Jersey. So kind of understand your climate and your soil, just everything that grows well. And then I would say just take a chance, just kind of dive in and plant something. And I think you'll learn a lot from that cycle of planting where, something dies and you're like, oh, how did that happen? Or what's this pest that's attacking? And so then you learn a lot about just the local culture where you live. And I think it's a journey, so it doesn't all have to be learned or started in one year. You have plenty of time. Each season presents new opportunity.
Absolutely. But what I find is that people get so excited that they overdo a lot of things and then they
Yeah.
burn themselves out because sometimes we don't always have the education behind us when we get started, but we have that excitement. and then we bring so many things on, and we don't give ourselves the opportunity to see
Yeah.
the pitfalls and the gains and the successes and the challenges. But I think you're absolutely right that start small, and just practice with one thing, couple things at a time.
Yeah, and it also, it can, at first it can seem very labor intensive, especially before you start to maybe put a lot of that permaculture or sustainability practices into place, where you're constantly having to tend to the garden. And if you plant a lot of stuff all at once, it can be pretty overwhelming. And I think that's where learning about some of those principles of sustainability, where you can utilize the environment around you to integrate into that and not work against it, it can really help alleviate the burden on you, because nature is pretty amazing, and it wants to grow and it wants to proliferate.
Yes, it does. So talk about proliferating. So right now we are in a world pandemic with this
Yeah.
coronavirus. And what are your thoughts about that? And what are your thoughts about how it's impacted us, our communities, the world? And where do you think that it's going to be bringing people into the future?
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting time for sure. I've noticed that a lot of people in this time, and you see a lot of stuff posted online of DIY projects and different things that you can do at home in lieu of going to the store, because the stores have a lot of shortages. And so I think there is a lot of interest, and that's maybe a silver lining in all of this. There's a lot of interest on how you can be more self-sustaining and less reliable on outside sources. And just going to the store, when I've had to go to the store, I've kind of seen a shift in buying habits. It's interesting to just look, and I would love if someone would do a study on it to see the type of things that people are buying at the store. Flowers going off the shelf, and people are getting into baking and making their own breads, their own sourdough starters, things like that. And so as people are kind of forced to stay at home, I've noticed that there has been that shift to how can we kind of be more sustainable and do things ourselves and not have to rely on these outside sources. And so I think, if anything, it really shows the need for all of us really to be educated, or maybe just exposed to this world of being able to produce and provide for your families in your own backyard, even in a container. I think also there's kind of been a silver lining that because people have been cooped up at home during this pandemic, it's afforded them the opportunity to spend more time with their family, to get out in their backyard and connect with nature. And so especially younger people that maybe feel like they don't have a lot of skills or life experience, I think getting into homesteading or just gardening in general can be a really, really valuable skill to learn and to have.
I agree. Absolutely. So where do you see yourself in the next 5 years with your homesteading?
Yeah, so it's definitely been a journey for me. I'm constantly learning and growing new techniques, new principles, and I would love, to eventually have a little bit more land, to be able to have a little bit more yield, to be able to sustain myself and my family more and more, and depend on those outside sources less and less throughout the year. So, that might look like moving a little bit out west, maybe Pennsylvania in a couple years. Just being able to be more sustainable, kind of more integrated into a permaculture type of mentality. And yeah, just taking it a step at a time, really, and see how it grows. And then maybe one day, using this my homestead as a marketable source of income, potentially even a supplemental source of income down the road. And then also, I think for me, having a baby at home, it's helping to learn those skills and techniques that I can pass down to her as she grows up in this world, and that she'll have that kind of leg up early on in her life.
Wonderful. I love to hear that.
Yeah.
So Tom, we're getting ready to wrap up. One last question that I ask all the folks on my interviews. If you could sum up in one word what your experience has meant to you thus far with your homesteading experience, what would that word be?
Wow, I would probably have to say transformative. There's really been a paradigm shift in how I view the world, how I view my relationship with nature, with the ground, with the soil, and like I said earlier, just trying to realize that we're a part of this earth, and we have, I think, a responsibility to tend to it well. And doing my part in that is just integrating wherever I'm living and trying not to be wasteful, trying to be more sustainable. And that's been a really cool, transformative journey for me, and something that I look forward to see in the next couple of years, what that's going to look like.
Well, thank you, Tom. It's been a pleasure speaking with you and meeting with you and hearing your story. And thank you for being such a good steward.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining me today.